This is The Express with Gary Allen, your 360-degree view of the world. Now, here's your host, Gary Allen.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Express. Good and delightful to be with you. Gary Allen here. And before we get into tonight's show, I just want to say to everybody, have a great holiday weekend coming up, would you please? I probably will mention something about it after the show or towards the end of the show tonight. But please, everybody have a safe holiday weekend. It's Easter, and for those of you that are of the Christian faith, as I am, this is a very important time of the year for all of us. And again, thank you so much for joining us here on The Express. Gary Allen with you. If you want to keep up with me, go to GaryAllenTalkShow.com. That's my website. You can have all the links to all the different podcasts. And please, folks, if you're listening and you're on Facebook and you see that I have a link out there about podcast going in and listening to the show, go ahead, do me a favor and do that. Thursday night, the show will not repeat itself because Renee's on vacation. She's actually down here in Florida. ProgressiveVoices.com is another place you can check out the show, as well as on TMVcafe.com. Go to the radio tab, and my archives are in there, along with all the other hosts that are here on the network. But again, if you go to GaryAllenTalkShow.com, you'll be able to catch all the places where I do put all my shows, as well as this particular show tonight will be on there in probably about 4 or 5 days from now. My guest for tonight is, it's kind of nice that every once in a while I'm able to book someone on the program who I have a great deal of respect for, as well as being a friend of mine. Bruce Merrin and I have been friends for about 15 years now, ever since we met on that wonderful afternoon in Las Vegas. Bruce Merrin is the president of Celebrity Speakers and Entertainment Bureau. He's celebrating well over 42 years in the show business. In that period of time, he has been one of the top 10 grossing firms in Los Angeles and Las Vegas. 1973 is when he began this whole mishigash. We're going to get into how that got started. He has represented people such as Johnny Carson, Michael Landon. He's also represented Presidents Clinton, Bush, Reagan, Ford, astronauts like Buzz Aldrin, Jim Lovell, Jim Carpenter, Wally Schirra. He has also worked with Jackie Robinson, Lassie, Merv Griffin, Phyllis Diller, Ed McMahon. You name it, he's worked with them. He's represented them. He's put together a lot of events in the Las Vegas area as well as Los Angeles. He is one of the most delightful gentlemen in the world, and I'm about to lay something on him because he's listening as I'm doing this lengthy introduction. Not only is he a graduate of UCLA, but he's also a graduate of their film school, and this is something he doesn't know until just now. I also went to UCLA. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, my good friend and president of Celebrity Speakers and Entertainment Bureau, Mr. Bruce Merrin. Good evening, sir. Welcome to The Express.
Good evening. You know, at UCLA, I went to UCLA with further ado. Yeah, he was the valedictorian there. Yeah. True story. Anyway, it's great to hear your voice, and thank you for that beautiful introduction. I was looking around my office, and a lot of those wonderful names that you mentioned, I have photos with me and those people right here in the office. So anyway, it's very, very kind of you. And listen, let's just do a quick switch. Yeah. How many of your listeners know that among your many talents that you are the absolute best Jay Leno impressionist and impersonator in the whole world? Do your listeners know that?
I've probably mentioned it a few times, but Bruce, I know what I'm about to say. You're going to go, but I kind of play down a lot of that different stuff. I do talk about celebrities that I've known that have been good friends of mine, but I don't talk about that. I talk about Jay, because Jay and I have been friends forever. You have worked with Jay as well. Yes. And as a matter of fact, I don't remember if it was you or someone else said to me, they said, Jay is extremely humble and he's very nice, and you're pretty much the same thing. You don't take the show business thing to the point where it blows your head out of proportion or anything like that. And but I will tell you this much: being your friend has been one of the pure delights of my life. Seeing you from time to time as we would have lunch together. And you're going to get into that story about the one time we went to the Mexican restaurant that you wanted to go to. That's the funniest story. But back in 1973 is when this whole thing began. You were invited along with Michael Landon because Michael was your client and he was booked on The Tonight Show. And later on, you went with Michael to Johnny Carson's house to have dinner. And that's when this whole thing about celebrity speakers and an entertainment bureau began. Talk about that story, Bruce.
No, you're absolutely right. And it was 42 years ago. Imagine how blessed I was that in my first year of PR, and of course, prior to that for 3 years, I worked for my mom's famous Hollywood legendary PR firm, and she taught me the business. But anyway, Michael Landon became my first really big client. And so I was at the Tonight Show with Michael, and it was a very big thrill. I was still a very young guy, and he did his great performance, as he always does, on Johnny Carson. So Johnny came backstage after the show was done into the dressing room. I was there with Michael, and Johnny says, "Hey, Bruce, Michael, how would you guys like to come to my home in Malibu for dinner?" And my heart started pounding, Gary. It started pounding. I'm still a very young kid, and I'm being invited to Johnny Carson's home for dinner. So Michael said yes, I said yes, and we had a delightful dinner there with Johnny. And so Johnny says to me, we're sitting there at dinner, he says, "Bruce, the past few years you've been bringing these very famous people onto my show, really household names. Have you ever, Bruce, thought about starting a celebrity speakers bureau?" And I said, "Well, Johnny, I have a public relations company, but I don't know anything about a celebrity speakers bureau. I don't have any experience." He says, "Well, Bruce, I'm going to make it easy." He says, "Johnny Carson, I'm going to be your very first client." So I think, oh, my God, am I dying and going to heaven? And then Michael chimes in and says, "Well, look, I'm going to be your second client." And then the next day, Ed McMahon calls me up. He says, "Hey, I understand you're starting a speakers bureau. I want to be your client too." So 42 years ago, that's how it all started. So imagine how blessed I was to start this celebrity business with, legends, true legends in the field.
Yeah, I worked with Ed McMahon in Las Vegas a couple of times doing slot tournaments and stuff when I first got there for a job. And what a gracious gentleman he was. We talked about the Marine Corps. Of course, I was in the Air Force, but my dad was in the Marine Corps, and we talked an awful lot about that. And he's the one that instilled in me, besides my uncle, who about, Tubby, about giving back. Always giving back. Prime the well. If you have something, even if you don't have two quarters to rub together, but you're working towards things and give back, because there are people that are less fortunate than you. So I learned that lesson through Ed really, really well. But the story that I always love about Ed, and I even asked him about it, I said, "Is it true, or is it just something you said on the Tonight Show, that some member of your family was the one that invented mayonnaise?"
Yes.
And he still, to this, well, Ed's been gone a while now.
Yes,
but
yes.
he said, "Yeah, there's somebody in my family came up with it, and that's how mayonnaise began." And he looked at me kind of sheepishly, and so did his son. And I thought, somebody's pulling my leg here. But no, apparently, honest to God, somebody in the Ed McMahon family came up with the recipe for mayonnaise, and I've been grateful ever since. I will tell you that.
Well, that is a great story. And I'm looking on my office wall, two of the real treasured photos that I have. One is of me and with Ed McMahon, taken at his home in Beverly Hills. This was after a big paying engagement. The other is with him and his wife, Pamela, in the showroom, the Versailles showroom at the Riviera. He and Pamela loved the show Splash. So those are two photos that are hanging here. Hey, can we tell a fun Ed McMahon story that I'm sure he wouldn't mind, that I'll bet your listeners have never heard?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, before we go too far, speaking of pictures on the wall, I've never asked for one, but I've got to have a Bruce Merrin picture, because I have on my wall pictures, because I've worked with Sammy Shore and Charlie Callis, and I have those pictures on my wall. I don't have a Bruce Merrin on, so tomorrow we're going to rectify that.
We absolutely 100% we will do that. So here's my Ed McMahon story. I had booked him for a very high-paying engagement in Los Angeles. It was with Bank of America. So we go back to his home in Beverly Hills, and we had a really nice photo taken of both of us, and that's the one that's hanging on my wall. And he says, "Bruce, I've never taken you upstairs. Come up with me. I want to show you something really special and neat in my bedroom." And I'm thinking, what in the world does he want to show Bruce Merrin in Ed McMahon's bedroom? Okay. So we walk in and his chest is, kind of out, and he points up. The entire ceiling in Ed McMahon's bedroom was mirrored. Okay. So how's that? How's that for a story?
Well,
Picture that.
I got one. I have one like that myself, or I had one when I was married with my wife in Chicago. We had a mirrored bedroom, but the glass came from a Ford Motor Company factory, and it said the objects may appear to be closer than they really are. So
that's a great line.
That
is a great line.
He was fantastic. You have been in Vegas since the 50s, correct?
That's right. Our family moved here in 1956. I was in junior high back then, Gary, and my dad was the executive vice president and general manager of the Flamingo Hotel, and my dad attended all of the owners' meetings. You can imagine to be a fly on the wall in those meetings, huh?
Yeah. That was the day, which is coming to my question. Talk about the difference in Vegas in the 50s and 60s and the 70s, and then when Howard Hughes got a hold of everything and corporations did, how it's changed not only for the people, the visitors, but for you as an agent dealing with the entertainment directors and the atmosphere overall in Vegas, and then bring us up to now, your feelings on what's going on out there.
Well, sure. In the 50s, in 56, 57, when we lived here, I am so blessed that my mom and dad took me in the 50s to some of the really big shows. I remember when they took me to see Sammy Davis Jr. at the Sands. And even though I was only 13 years old, when he sang Mr. Bojangles at the end of the show, I had chills. But my mom and dad, they took me to see Judy Garland and Frank Sinatra, Liberace, all the big headliners, Ella Fitzgerald, Pearl Bailey. But anyway, back in the 50s, of course, what was so different, corporations weren't running Las Vegas. So all the stars really got paid the big dollars really that they richly deserved, and back then in the 50s and 60s, it was very elegant. You would walk into a showroom and the maitre d's were dressed in black tuxes and, the wonderful outfits. And it was a totally different atmosphere back then. Women and men really dressed up. Now in Las Vegas, you can walk into the Celine Dion showroom or David Copperfield showroom and see people walking in with tank tops and sandals. It's really changed a lot, since those times. And when you mentioned Howard Hughes, he was the one that really started changing where Vegas turned over to a real corporate style community. And then, of course, in the 70s, now I love Steve Wynn. His hotels, of course, the first one was the Mirage, absolutely beautiful, and then Bellagio, stunning, and the Wynn. But anyway, when the corporations took over for the entertainment side, because you did ask about that, things really did change once that the corporations did take over. So there were big changes in the industry. I have such fond memories of the 50s. It was such an elegant and glamorous time, and the women were just so beautiful. So I miss those days of the 50s, the Sammy Davis and
you're not alone. I will tell you, I would go and see Tom Jones if I wasn't working with him, or I would perform at Caesar's Palace. And I tell everybody, because a lot of my buddies and I also performed there as comics, the clocks that were on the floors of on the stage, the clocks that were on the floors. Right. And back when the boys ran the place, they'd come over to you, the whatever they would call their stage manager. It was some guy named Vinny or whomever. And he'd go, "Hey, kid, now I want 15 minutes or a half hour." They'd give you a time frame, not a minute less, not a minute more, but you were in and out of there because they wanted people out of those showrooms in the casinos gambling. And if you were late or early, they fined you. They would, it was a whole different era in Vegas. I remember this one guy, I think his name was Barney. I can't remember which hotel I was at, but anyway, he was cool with me. I ran over 30 seconds and he was okay with it. But I performed at the Mirage many times. particularly in the Danny Gans room, as you know,
Yes,
the late Danny Gans.
beautiful room. Yes,
It's a beautiful room. Who's in there now?
at the Mirage, Terry Fader is celebrating his 10-year anniversary. Probably the biggest star ever from AGT, America's Got Talent, and I've seen his show many times. In fact, I had the pleasure of bringing my mom to the show. We were backstage with Terry, and also my youngest brother and his 2 kids. Terry Fader, I'm just letting your people know, not only in Florida but all over the world, he has one of the best shows anywhere in the world. But he's been at the Mirage now 10 years, so that's who's at the Mirage now. And you can imagine how successful he is, that he's been running there for 10 years now.
Well, I think his contract, unless they renewed it, was going to be up. I think they gave him 10 years, $100 million or something like that. But one of the things that you mentioned that has always been one of my pet peeves, and every entertainer in Vegas has probably talked to you about this, or anybody of any ilk, and even patrons, is people going into the 8 o'clock shows in flip-flops and shorts and tank tops and Hawaiian shirts. This used to be the show. You know, the lounge shows are always great. Now that's curtailed a little bit, a little bit.
Yeah.
But the big shows, going in to see Tom or Enge or Engelbert, for those of you who don't know, Enge or some of the other big acts that were in Vegas, Sammy. Oh my God! You know, I the people to dress like that. It's just. I actually watched a maitre d' at the Wynn Hotel. When I was, you remember, I worked there for a short period of time.
Right.
I went in to see the show one night, and it was Spam-A-Lot, and the aisle guy, I can't remember, Bruce.
The usher.
Anyway, the usher wouldn't let this couple in because she came in her bathing suit with a little skirt underneath it, still wet, to see Spam-A-Lot. He said, "I'm not going to let you in."
Yeah,
and Steve Wynn just happened to be standing right near him with his guy. And Steve said, "What's the problem?" He said, "That's right. You can go get your money back, but I'm not letting you in like that." I find it so disrespectful to all of us who are performers that you show up like that. Go put a pair of slacks on and a shirt. Your wife can wear a pair of jeans or something, but try to be respectful. But some of these people out there, they just don't get it. The eloquence of Las Vegas is gone, and I wish to God it could come back. The one thing I love when you put those old pictures on Facebook is just it brings back all the old romance of the good old days. And
completely. And by the way, when I was thinking about the 50s, another elegant performer was Lena Horne. Lena Horne was just unbelievable. Not only was she a great singer and performer, but you talk about elegance and class, the way that she dressed on stage. I really miss the elegant part of the 50s and, into the 60s as well. But yes, that part has certainly changed as well. Now, the one area for my business, because we were talking about how does that affect my business, the part for my business that has been really good is, of course, Las Vegas is one of the 2 biggest destination resorts in the U.S. So we get a lot of corporations that come in to Las Vegas, and because I'm here, I very frequently get to book some very big name acts for the corporation. So that's one area where Las Vegas has really helped me greatly. And I mean, without doing a lot of name dropping, but I mean, over the years, I booked people like J-Lo and Mariah Carey and so many, Ricky Martin. So on the corporate level, it's been good for me because we do get very big, large conventions that come into Las Vegas. And when those conventions come in, a lot of the times for their closing night, they want to book a big name entertainer. So that's an area that has actually been very good for my business. But yes, I miss the classy times of the 50s with the maitre d's. They were just so special. And the dinner shows, of course, we didn't mention that. Yeah. Like my dad at the Flamingo, I used to love when they were so nice to have me come to the Flamingo. I remember seeing Judy Garland, and it's a dinner. They bring dinner to your table, and just such a stylish way to see a show. I don't know of any dinner shows that are in Las Vegas now, No. We're talking to Bruce Merrin from Celebrity Speakers and Entertainment Bureau, celebrating 42 years in show business. Gary Allen with you here on The Express. Bruce, let's talk a little bit about where you came up with the slogan,
tired of hearing the sound of one hand clapping, and this was putting together an event that you were going to do. Where did you come up with that idea, that thought, that phrase?
Way back in the early 70s. You know how we all try to get the creative juices flowing, and at the time, of course, it was a new business that I had, and I was trying to think, what kind of slogan could I come up with that would have some impact to, like, certified meeting planners. Those are the people, those are the targets that we deal with in the corporate area. The certified meeting planners work for the very big companies, and they schedule events for their companies. So I was trying to think, being a certified meeting planner, the one thing that they hate is when people come to their events and it's so unpleasant. You know, it's not a good, successful thing. So I was thinking, tired of the sound of one hand clapping. That to me made sense for the certified meeting planners, because they would understand what I was saying. They want to book, whether it's a speaker or an entertainer, they want to book somebody that's going to make them a superstar to everybody that's within their group. So that's, I came up with it on my own. It wasn't through meditation, but I just had my own creative session with myself, thinking, if I was a creative meeting planner, what kind of a slogan might jump out at me? And that phrase, tired of the sound of one hand clapping, that was something that I came up with, and it was so good that I've used it for over 40 years.
Yeah, and it's a good one, because I've done a lot of conventions. When I lived there, I traveled a lot doing conventions, and they can be pretty bland, because they tell the comedians right up front, no dirty stuff, no this, no that. And sometimes it's so watered down, it's almost like the comic's not funny anymore. But if you get a big name entertainer in there, which I know some of them that have come into that town that you can book, that is just absolutely unbelievable. Talk about the time that you worked with Jackie Robinson on the Bank of America event, and how that all came about. And if you would, which is one of my many questions to you, talk about what it's like to put together an event when a client calls you, like Bank of America, or some of the other people that you work with, like Rolls-Royce and ABC and Aetna, Amazon, Boeing. What is it like when you first get that call? And then we'll get into the Jackie Robinson thing.
Sure, and I will definitely answer that. But just one segue, because you were talking about comedians, and you know, one of the clients that was one of my favorite of all time in the comedian comic area was Phyllis Diller, and I'm looking at her photo right here in my office. And she was one of the very first stand-up comics that I booked in the corporate arena, and she made me such a hero because she got standing ovations, and she was hilarious. And as you would appreciate, being in that field, she was such a pioneer in comedy. So I did want to give a shout out to Phyllis, because she was one of the greatest of all time. Now, talking about Jackie Robinson, and first of all, I have a big thank you to my dad, because the way that I met Jackie Robinson was my dad produced a very successful Emmy Award-winning TV show called Sports Challenge that was hosted by Dick Enberg.
Dick Enberg,
and my dad had booked Jackie Robinson. Now, back when I was a kid, I used to go to Ebbets Field and see Jackie Robinson play, and the Dodgers were my favorite team. So my dad asked me for Sports Challenge, would I like to pick up Jackie Robinson at the airport? So, I mean, my God, you know, it was such a thrill, and I did pick Jackie Robinson up at the airport, and I told him about our celebrity bureau. And anyway, he and Muhammad Ali became the first sports clients that I ever booked. Now, with Jackie and Bank of America, what happened with them that was so interesting, when they contacted me, and this was in the early 70s, probably 73, somewhere in there, somewhere in the course of the conversation, there was a 42-year anniversary that was going on with Bank America, some kind of a 42-year anniversary. I said, well, by the way, did you know that Jackie Robinson, who's in the Baseball Hall of Fame, that he wore number 42 on his uniform for the Brooklyn Dodgers? And they said, wow, that is right. I said, well, wouldn't it be great? Because I found out that the demographics of that group was primarily male. Mostly men were going to be at that event, and I found out that they are very big sports fans. So when I mentioned that Jackie wore number 42 And, the thought that they could make it a baseball-themed event, they absolutely flipped over it. They loved the idea. And Jackie, was great. He was fantastic. So I wound up being quite a big hero. And when I'm dealing with the event planners, my main job when I'm dealing with first-time event planners, not selling. It's not like we're in that salesman's hat. Hey, how'd you like to book Jay Leno today? It's the exact opposite. I ask them a lot of questions. I find out about their group, if they have a theme for the group, what city it's going to be taking place in, what their budget is, things like that. And then at the very, very end, I'll ask about the budget. So what we try to do in our business is custom tailor the event for whoever our client is and make good suggestions so that, that they'll be a hero. Because you had mentioned so kindly earlier about Buzz Aldrin, remember? And you posted about Buzz Aldrin. Believe it or not, there was a big group. I'll think of the company. But when I asked them, do you have a theme for your event? They said, yeah, it's going to the moon. That was the theme for their event. So, and Buzz Aldrin lived in Los Angeles. This event was in L.A. I said, well, if you're able to pay Buzz Aldrin's fee, he was on the moon, So anyway, that was a case where, I was a hero because I booked somebody that was a great speaker, and, it tied into their conference. And I loved working with the astronauts, Gary.
Yeah. They over here where I live in Cocoa Beach area.
Yes.
And this is where, of course, those rockets all took off into outer space. And Buzz Aldrin and the original 7 Mercury astronauts, which you all worked with.
Right.
Most people remember Wally Schirra, of course, working with Walter Cronkite on most of the launches because Wally he had something wrong with his hearing and he couldn't fly anymore. But over here, these gentlemen are revered, unbelievably so, which brings up an interesting question that I wanted to ask you. We're talking to Bruce Merrin from Celebrity Speakers and Entertainment Bureau. He's the president of the company, and he's celebrating 42 years in the business. Gary Allen with you here on The Express. When I was a kid, and I think I've told you this story, how I met Frank, Sammy, and Dean at the same time down at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami.
Yes.
They did an awful lot for Las Vegas. And more than Elvis Presley. Now, I have nothing against Elvis Presley, okay? I don't have anything against the man. I'm not a big fan. Yeah, I'm not a big fan, but you could take your kids to see his movies and everything would be cool. It's like going to see a Jerry Lewis movie.
Sure.
But why is it in Vegas we only have 3 streets named after them? We have Frank Sinatra Drive, Dean Martin Way, and there's one for Sammy. Why isn't there 3 statues somewhere on the Strip dedicated to these 3 gentlemen who did so much entertainment-wise? And there are hundreds of other entertainers as well, but I'm talking about these 3 gentlemen in particular because of Ocean's 11. I mean, they never wanted to be referred to as the Rat Pack. Richie Martin, who you knew, I knew, because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have known him to begin with. But the bottom line is why isn't there more done for these 3 gentlemen?
I totally agree, and I'd like to see that happen because, again, going back to the 50s, thanks to my mom and dad, I saw all 3 of them perform here in Vegas at the old Sands Hotel. I would love to see that, and I just have to share one thing because you were mentioning about Cocoa Beach and the astronauts. I'm looking right now. This is a Vegas story. Me and Wally Schirra and a very big group. This was at Spago Hotel, which at Caesar's Palace.
Right.
Spago Hotel. I booked Wally Schirra, and when you did that little intro about Wally, you were spot on about him. But one of the nicest people that I've ever met. Yes, he was an amazing astronaut. He was great working with Walter Cronkite, but I'll never forget that evening right here in Vegas at Spago, and I have the photo on my wall. So thank you for mentioning Wally. He's a very special part of my life.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, I believe now, I'm not 100% certain of this, but I believe all 7 of the original Mercury astronauts have all passed on now. I don't think there's one of them that's alive even. But yeah, I met a few astronauts over the years at different events, and they were very kind, very nice. Frank Borman, of course, ran Eastern Airlines for a while, where my dad was a pilot. and
Yes.
I got to meet Frank. Everybody blames Frank for the downfall of Eastern. It really wasn't him. It was Frank Lorenzo. But the
Right.
bottom line is that these were all really humble men, highly intelligent, but really, really. No, wait. Jim Lovell is still alive. I'm sorry. Somebody just
Yes.
said to me, Jim Lovell is still alive. I apologize.
And as you know, I've booked him many
Yeah.
times. He's a great speaker. Now here's a question, because you're an expert, and I'm
Yeah.
not sure. The original 7, wasn't Scott Carpenter one of the original 7
Yes.
or not? Maybe you would know. I believe
Yes.
he was.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, the first one to pass away was Gus Grissom in the
Mhm.
Apollo 1 tragedy. But yeah, I believe Scott Carpenter was one of the originals, and a couple of them weren't able to fly after a period of time, Wally being one of them. I think something happened to his hearing or something,
Right,
or in a
right.
ear or something. I don't remember specifically, but I know they were all really great and nice gentlemen. But getting back to what I was saying, I wish, I mean, you're the president of the Sterling Club. By the way, for
Yes.
those who don't know that's a big-time club. I went in there once to get a glass of water, and they threw me out. They said, Mr. Allen, would you please get out of here? I said, but I'm an entertainer on the Strip. They said, please get out of here. But
There's
anyway,
the door. Use it.
yes, use it, and don't let it hit you on the way out. But it's a
Right.
beautiful club. But I mean,
Yes.
I just don't understand. I love Frank, Sammy, and Dean, and
Yes.
I've said this on the air, and I've said this to many of my friends, that there was only one other performer to me that could even come close to Sammy Davis, and that was Michael.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I agree, and I've had the privilege to see both of them. I totally agree. I totally agree.
I mean,
And
but
with
when-
Sammy,
Yeah.
as you know, with Sammy, and again going back to the first time, of course I saw him many times, but I remember the first time seeing him at the Sands. He did everything, as you remember. He sang, he danced, he was funny, he did impersonations. He was just absolutely unbelievable. And boy, when you talk about charisma, I can't think of anybody that had more charisma than Sammy,
Sammy was unbelievable. When I met them at the Fontainebleau Hotel, and of course I would see Dean from time to time, and I loved Dean very much. You know that. I have a passion for
Yes,
Dean and
I
Richie
know.
and the whole Martin family. But the bottom line is he went, hey, Pally, what's going on? And he had hands. People don't realize Dean Martin had hands the size of whatever your hand size is, double it. And that's about where Dean was.
They were
he
bigger than
shuffled-
Marco Rubio. Is that right?
Oh.
Bigger than Marco Rubio. Yeah, right?
Please don't mention his name in Florida. He's not
I
well liked here.
know. I know.
And Marco's not well liked at all. Let's talk about, if there's someone out there who is interested in getting into the business the way you do. What do you recommend for someone to do? I know that we have UNLV out there. They have a degree in hospitality, but do they teach anything to do with being an agent or someone in the business at all?
It's a fascinating question that you're asking, and the funny thing is, I don't know any universities. Of course, you said earlier, and you went to UCLA. I graduated from the film school.
Yeah.
There are film schools and TV and whatever. I don't know of any school that teaches students, how to become an agent. I'm not aware of any that do. So I think it's more you graduate in something that might be the arts, arts oriented, and then kind of segue into it. But you're right about hotel administration at UNLV. They have a great school for that, and then people can get into the hotel hospitality area. But as far as becoming an agent, I'm not aware of any college or university that does that.
Yeah, which is a shame, because I think kids really need to have an idea where they can intern and things like that. What are some of the, by the way, before I went to UCLA, I went to the University of Miami, which I really consider my big school, but I wanted to throw that in earlier because every time I would see Mark Harmon in LA, he'd say, yeah, you went to UCLA, didn't you? I said, yeah, but I went to Miami first. But
Hurricanes, yes.
Yes. What are the skill sets that someone needs to already have before they even think about going to work for an agency, whether it be in New York or Chicago, LA, Las Vegas? What are some of the things that they need to have already in their pocket before they even walk in the door?
Well, number one, I would say in our business, being an extrovert is really important, because it's a people business. Talking about that word agent, it's all relationships. So to be an extroverted person is a very big asset. Over and above that, the commitment, the dedication, the passion, the work ethic, all those things come in to play as well. But for somebody that's introverted, I don't really feel an agent would be for that person, because you've really got to be able to sell the sizzle. And, some people have heard about that elevator talk. You've got to be able to sell the sizzle and get the attention of people. So somebody that's extroverted and charismatic, they're going to do really well in my business when it comes to being an agent. Those are some of the things that I feel are really important. You have to build up your knowledge as far as the industry. There's many areas of specialization when you're an agent. For us, we book corporations and we book with very big associations. I'll have we had a booking with the National Pretzel Bakers Association. How was that? Pretty big, huh?
Every time anybody mentions a pretzel to me, I remember Robin and the Seven Hoods and that one scene where the guy was making the pretzel maker, and I did the pretzel with the double twist. I always remember that when it comes to that stuff. But I mean, as far as education is concerned, obviously being able to read and write and be competent at that, be competent at your language. If you're a good wordsmith, I guess that would be it. And of course, as you said, thinking on your feet is probably ultimately the important thing, much like a comedian. If you're able to think on your feet, because some of these clients will throw things at you at the last minute, and I've been part of that when I was the entertainer and stuff. So I guess all of that rolled into one. I want to.
The other thing, Gary, there's one other thing that I would throw in that is absolutely crucial now, and that would be social media skills. You really have to be honed in, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all the different social media, because we use all the social media a lot. We use it a lot. So besides everything else, you really want to be quite intelligent when it comes to being able to handle social media, because it can really play a big part in an instrumental success.
Yes. We're talking to Bruce Merrin, president of Celebrity Speakers and Entertainment Bureau, celebrating 42 years in this business. He's been a friend of mine for a very long time, and I'm so proud to call him friend and proud to have him with us here on The Express. Gary Allen with you, as I am you every Tuesday night. Let's talk about someone who's been in the news lately over the last few years. And you worked with him when he was just a gold medalist, and he won a number of gold medals in the Olympics. And, of course, now he's had a sex change completely, and that's Bruce Jenner. What was Bruce like?
Well, first of all, Bruce was really one of my most favorite clients of all time. When I was in California, to answer your question, I lived in Calabasas. Bruce and Kris Jenner lived in Hidden Hills. For those that are familiar with that area, they are both right next to each other. Bruce and Kris were less than 5 minutes away from my home, and I used to visit them very frequently at their home. Now, of course, as you know, I'm a very big sports fan, so when Bruce Jenner won the decathlon, he was an instant hero. In fact, I'm looking right now of a picture when he got the gold medal. His hands were up in the air, and he had just won that 1,500-meter race. So anyway, going way, way back, he became instant friends with me because he was somebody that I admired and respected. And when he did go out and do his talks, he had great video from the decathlon and Olympics and all, and, that he was on the box of Wheaties. So anyway, he was a great inspirational and motivational speaker. And I will just tell you right here in Vegas, one of my most favorite bookings of all time, I booked President Ford, Cheryl Landon, Michael Landon's daughter, and Bruce Jenner and Rich Little. So anyway, when Bruce was Bruce, he was incredible. He was a great speaker, and I probably booked him over 50 times. I was very, very surprised when he came out and, became Caitlin, just because in all the years that I knew Bruce, there was never any indication that I ever thought that this would be, how he would be. But for me personally, I love him, or I love her now, and to me, whatever way he or she wants to be is fine. But all I can say is, as a speaker, he always performed at the highest level, and made me a hero with my clients, and he was a very good and popular speaker, spent a lot of time with the audiences. So it was just a big change from meeting him and Kris Jenner all the time at their homes in Hidden Hills in California as my neighbor, and then to see how things changed. I never would have guessed that in a million years.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would have. Before we get on to Muhammad Ali and Dick Enberg, you mentioned Rich Little, and I would see Rich a lot out there. And a lot of times we would be sitting around talking, and there might be Steve and Edie before Edie passed away and stuff.
Yes.
We'd all be sitting around, and he'd start with an impersonation, then I would do an impersonation, and eventually he and I would end up doing dueling Reagans. And,
that's great.
And it would be funny, or Nixon or something like that. I haven't talked to Rich, oh my God, in so long. I would love to get him on this show. If there's any way you can arrange that, I would be most grateful to you. And usually when I bring something like that up to you, I know you do everything you can for me in that
sure.
sense.
First of all, he's a very close personal friend. The person that handles all of his business is a wonderful woman named Dana Stern, and I'll be happy to try. And Rich is just the greatest. Now, Las Vegas, so I'm just sharing this to you. When I moved back to Vegas in 91, Rich was living in Canyon Gate, which I think that area of Canyon Gate. Yeah. And I was so blessed to work with him. And one of the first shows he did, again, talking old school Vegas, was at the old Sahara. Remember the Congo room?
Oh, God,
the Congo room.
Oh, my God.
And he performed there at the Congo room. But, I just love Rich. And by the way, he loves classic films. That was one of the first things I learned about Rich when I first met him. He is a huge fan of, the Turner Classic Movie type of films. And anyway, great performer.
He would be perfect as a host for Turner Classic Films. Now that Robert has passed away, I mean, he would be absolutely perfect for it, and he'd be a great host. Let's talk about. I could not
agree with you more. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, let's talk about a gentleman that brought about a lot of ire to people in the 60s and early 70s because he wouldn't serve in the military. But you had a chance to work with him. I met him a couple of times when I lived in Chicago. Of course, when I met him, he wasn't physically well. The Parkinson's had really taken over. And, of course, I'm talking about, as Howard Cosell would say, the great one himself, Muhammad Ali.
That was great. That was terrific. Well, he's truly one of my all-time heroes, and I was born in Louisville. I was born in Louisville. So when I first met him, and again, this was thanks to my dad on Sports Challenge. The first time that I ever met Muhammad Ali was on Sports Challenge. But I was a huge fan of his, as a boxer. And I will say this, because this, your listeners don't, but I was a Vietnam veteran, and I was there in 1968. And I think my sad story that when I was there, one of my best friends was shot mortally and died on my lap. But having said that, and having returned from Vietnam, I admired Muhammad Ali because he really stood up for his principles and his ideals. And, he lost out at least about 3 years of boxing or maybe more because he stood up for what he believed in. So even though I was a Vietnam veteran, I have no problem on the stance, that he took. And
when I came back from Vietnam myself, and even while my first tour, I said to my dad, I said, because Muhammad Ali was on TV one night when I was home, and I said, I know why that man did not want to serve. We shouldn't even be there.
Interesting.
That's another story for another day. But I was in Pleiku. I don't know where you were, but I know that's a war we should have never been involved in. Again, that's a story for another day. Let's move on.
And by the way, I love you. I've got to tell you, I was everywhere from the DMZ all the way down to the Mekong Delta, and I was in Pleiku, Nha Trang, you name it, Queen Anne. I was everywhere. So that's interesting. We just found out something that we have in common. I have pictures in Pleiku, so that's great.
My cousin served in Pleiku before I got there. He was in there in 67 and 68. And then when I got my orders to go there, and for those of you who don't know, it's in the South Central Highlands of Vietnam. It's a mountainous territory, and it's very treacherous when you fly. And, of course, that's what I did. I flew helicopters. and it's very treacherous. But for those of you that are familiar with the Disney movie Baby Elephant Drop or whatever it was with Ray Liotta, that's
Right.
about play. That's about play coup. That's about all I can say about it. But let's move on to a man who passed away about a year ago now, I guess.
Yes.
He is considered, when I ask other broadcasters, sports-wise,
Yes.
like I do game show hosts when Wink was on here, and he talked
Right.
about him, the most consummate game show host. When you talk to other broadcasters and they talk about Dick Enberg and people that he has helped, he was and still is held in high regard. A gentleman, professional, always on time, always prepared, knew what he had to do. You didn't have to tell him twice. And he always had a smile on his face. And it was so glad to see you, so grateful to know you. And when he talked to you, it was like nothing else was going on in the world but you and Dick Enberg for that moment. And talk about Dick, would you please?
No, I'll be happy. But you just described him so beautifully. I mean, look, in 42 years, I've had the privilege of working with superstars, you name it. Dick Enberg would be in my top 10. That's how special that Dick Enberg is to me. And by the way, the last booking that we had about 3 months before, unfortunately, he passed was in Memphis, Tennessee at the Peabody. And anyway, just the greatest. But here's the neat part of the first part of my story with Dick Enberg. In California, the first time that Dick Enberg called me, he was doing the boxing telecasts on KTLA TV Channel 5 in L.A. So in other words, his career was doing local boxing, and he knew that I was, booking celebrities in sports. So he calls me up. He says, Bruce, can we have lunch? He says, I'm not a celebrity now, but I'm really interested in doing speaking. So I met him before his career really took off. But one of the totally nicest people that I have ever worked with in my life, and as you mentioned earlier, a gentleman, people loved him. He always got standing ovations for us. And one story, again, because we're talking about the speaking area, part of it anyway, the last booking that I did book in Memphis, the night before, on a Saturday night, he was getting an award from the LA Press Club as like legendary sportscaster of all time, something like that, okay? It was a Saturday night. He was getting this big award. For him to do this engagement for me in Memphis, he would have had to take the early morning flight from LA to Memphis to be arriving on time and do it. Now, most people would have said to me, you know what, I got this big award I'm getting Saturday night. Let's book it another time. He says, Bruce, we've had a relationship for, almost 40 years. After this, I will get a hotel at the airport and fly out on the plane Sunday morning. And he did do it. That was the last one he ever did for us. And, of course, he got a standing ovation. So, anyway, I just think the world of him, and he was so talented. I just love him.
Yeah, he was a broadcaster's broadcaster in every sense of the word. And I think anybody who thinks about getting into this business, it's like when actors will say to me, who should I watch or emulate or look for good things to work into my repertoire? I always say, watch Spencer Tracy. Well, if you want to really learn how to be a good broadcaster, there are a number of them out there. Dick was not the only one, but Dick Enberg was a consummate professional. He always had an interesting story to tell. And that's funny in sports, and I know you love sports like I do. There aren't the storytellers in baseball anymore. Vince Scully, when I lived in Los Angeles, I loved Vince. He would and it's funny, he would talk about baseball and somehow he would roll into Farmer John's. He would roll in. He would roll in.
Great.
For those of you who don't know, Farmer John's is meat products. They sell meat out in cold cuts and stuff in the California area. I don't know how far they branched out, but at any rate, he would always roll that sponsorship, and I guess they were with him forever and a day. We're talking to Bruce Merrin, president of Celebrity Speakers and Entertainment Bureau, celebrating 42 wonderful years in show business. He's been my friend for over 15 years, and I'm proud to call him a friend because not a finer gentleman in the world. And he always loves my Jay Leno, which I will do in a little bit. But for right now, I'm just going to hold back a little bit. Bruce, if there's anything in Vegas you could change right now, whether it be business-wise, entertainment-wise, because everything is Cirque du Soleil shows out there, which, I think a couple on the Strip are fine. We don't need every hotel with a Cirque du Soleil show. But is there anything you would like to see changed in one or two aspects of what Las Vegas is today?
Well, if we're not going to go back to the atmosphere the way it was in the 50s, but that was my personal favorite time, even though I was in junior high at the time, because of the elegance and the glamour and the way the maitre d's were. So, I would love to see Vegas back the way it was in the 50s. Now it's so much more casual. And, and when you mention Cirque shows, we've got eight Cirque du Soleil shows in major showrooms. That's taking away 8 showrooms from big name entertainers that, can perform. But I will say on the positive side, because you and I were just mentioning, we're both very big sports fans. We have the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the hockey team. If people around the world may not know this, you know who's in first place in the NHL?
Yes, their first year in the league.
Golden Knights.
Their first year in the league, and they're going to be in the playoffs.
That's right. So anyway, we have them. We have the Raiders that are moving here. We have a professional soccer team. We've got a women's WNBA team. So anyway, on the sports side, I'm very happy about some of that is going on. But once corporate took over as far as Vegas, I wasn't happy to see that happen, because that for me has become a negative. And then the other side, some of your listeners, may not know this, but in the last year at all the hotels, they're charging for parking now. And, it was always free because people would gamble and spend money. And, so people that would go to the big hotels, you never had to pay for parking. I was at the Wynn Hotel a week ago, and it was $20 to park there for an hour. So
You're
again,
kidding.
That's corporate. Yeah, this is corporate. Yeah.
Were you at the original Wynn, or were you over at the Entourage?
Yes, I was at the original Wynn.
Or Encore.
Yeah, the Encore. That's right. One of my favorite restaurants at Wynn is a place called Costa de Mar. So anyway, it was $20 to park. So it's just common. All the hotels are charging now. But again, that gets back to the corporate side taking over. However, as I said earlier, the one positive of that for me is because the big corporations come in and stage events, I'm able to book very high-end entertainment clients because they're in Vegas and they want big-name, entertainers. So on that side, that part of it has been good for me. For example, Britney Spears just ended about a 2-year run here, but I had a very big client 2 years ago, and they wanted Britney, and it was easy to do because she was living here in Vegas at the time anyway. So on the money side for me and my business, that part has been good. But if I had my druthers, I'd love to go back to the 50s,
Yeah, I like those days too, when people would dress and the Strip was eloquent and there wasn't as many hotels as there are today. Let's talk about some of the presidents that you've worked with, former presidents, that is. You've worked with Bill Clinton, you've worked with President George Bush, you worked with Gerald Ford, and you worked with President Carter. Now, I knew Gerald Ford because I was lucky enough when I was in the military to serve with the 89th Airlift Wing at Andrews, and I was aboard Air Force One for 2.5 years. Talk about the differences between them. Bill Clinton is one of the most cordial, nice guys. Everything I said about Dick Enberg, you could pretty much say about Clinton as far as how he treated people. Always with a great deal of respect, always treating you like you're the most important person for that moment in time. And talk about George Bush. Was it George W. or junior or senior?
I have actually booked every single one, starting with President Reagan. But let me just one quick story, because you mentioned about President Ford and you spoke fondly. Okay, so I'm looking at a picture, President Ford shaking my hand. You know that little town of Mesquite, Nevada, about 90 miles up the road from here?
Yes.
We had a very big event in Mesquite, and I booked President Ford, and he was so nice. Of course, as you know, when they book the past presidents, they come out with all of the Secret Service people and all that.
Yep.
So he was on stage, and, he was escorted out of the limousine, did his talk. But here's the part of the story I want to tell you that I just admired, because, I booked him many times before.
Right.
When President Ford finished his talk, all the Secret Service people rushed on stage, and they were ready to, grab him off and take him into the limousine. And he holds up his hand. He says, guys, let's wait for a while. I'll bet a lot of these people out in the audience want to ask me some questions. He stayed for an hour extra just asking questions from the audience. So he was a class act, President Ford. Total class act.
Yes, very much so. What about President Clinton?
Oh, when we talk about charisma, certainly, I mean, President Reagan had the charisma as well, but President Clinton, just so lovable and amiable and charismatic, wonderful to deal with. I absolutely loved every single time that I've booked him. He's outgoing, extroverted, and I'll tell you, the audience, they would always love him. And wearing my hat, which is booking speakers and entertainers, I don't wear a political hat. For me, it doesn't matter if it's Republican, Democrat. Back in the Watergate days, I was booking G. Gordon Liddy and Colson and John Dean. Whoever they wanted. But to answer your question, President Clinton was as nice as any of the past presidents that I've booked, and just an absolute delight. And he's funny and engaging, a little bit different than his wife, I must say.
Oh, I know them both. A buddy of mine was his chief advance, and I got to meet him several times. I did my impersonation of him for both of them, and they both liked it very much. I never got to do my impersonation in front of Nancy or the President Reagan, but nevertheless. We've got just a couple of minutes left here. We've been talking to Bruce Merrin from Celebrity Speakers and Entertainment Bureau. He's the president. He's celebrating over 42 years in the business. If there's a corporation out there, somebody listening, how do they get a hold of you, Bruce?
Well, the easiest way would be to contact me via the website, and it's an easy one. It's Bruce Merrin's CelebritySpeakers.com. Bruce Merrin's CelebritySpeakers.com. They can always call me as well, but I don't want to have to give out a phone number on your show. But the easiest way is the website, Bruce Merrin's CelebritySpeakers.com. Yes.
Well, Bruce, one last thing before we go here, before we put up the closet. Your best advice to any young performer who wants to come to Las Vegas and become a performer?
Well, the best advice that wants to. Well, I would say, the shaking of the hands, the being extroverted, being friendly, going the extra mile, not getting a lot of sleep, but really pounding the pavement, as they used to say in the old days, pounding the pavement. It's all personal contacts, whether it's what I'm doing, booking speakers and entertainers, or whether it's a stand-up comic. You've got to make those personal relationships. You make those personal relationships, it'll go the extra mile for you in your career. So I really think that the personality, that really shines through,
That's
People
why
know when you're sincere. Yes?
That's why I didn't make it in Las Vegas.
You are great. You are great. So I guess we don't have time for the Ricardo story, no? We've been having so much time.
No, we're having so much fun.
Yes.
But we will get it the next time, because I guarantee you will be on with me. And we've been talking to Bruce Merrin, president of Celebrity Speakers and Entertainment Bureau. And Bruce, as always, you are a gentleman and a dear, dear friend. And without you, sometimes I don't know what I'd do when I would call you up and you cheer me up a little bit. And I thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on The Express.
It was an honor, and I love you, baby.
And I will talk to you in a little bit as soon as I get off the air.
Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, good night,
Thanks.
sir. Thank you.
Yes.
And I want to thank all of you out there for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us here on The Express. I thank you so much. Please have a very safe and sound holiday season. This is a very wonderful time, even though there's a lot of turmoil going on in the world. But please, just kind of take care of yourselves. GaryAllenTalkshow.com. That's ALAN. You can get all the information about me and find out where you can listen to some of my shows besides Facebook and Mixcloud and a couple other places. ProgressiveVoices.com. Go on to TMVCafe.com. We also have a lot of merchandise you can go and get in there. There's some, I think, that has to do with the Express. Go in there, go to the radio tab, and listen to the old archives. And please, catch some of my old shows. Some great guests on, much like Mr. Bruce Merrin is. But until next week, would you please do me a big favor? Take care of yourselves and each other. Good night.
You've been listening to The Express with Gary Allen. Join us here every Tuesday night at 10 for more captivating talk with Gary Allen. See you next time on The Express.